Welcome to PM Express tonight. Tonight, the great reveal. We're going to be unveiling the most fascinating of the 2020 pre-election polls yet. And to do that for us, with us, here on the election headquarters, PM Express tonight, is Dr. Theo Echampon. He is a member of the IRIS Research Consortium and an Imani Fellow. Also joining him with his colleagues, Dr. Khalid Musa. He is also a member of the IRIS Research Consortium and a CDD Fellow. And Dr. John Osai Kwapon, he is a member, IRIS Research Consortium, and also a CDD Fellow. After they're done with their presentation, unveiling this research that they've done over the last few weeks across the country, after they've unveiled the findings, we'll get the political parties' reaction to it here on PM Express. And so a lot of things to get through tonight for you here on this special edition of PM Express as we begin to look into this poll. You've had a lot of polls already in the last few weeks. Trust me, this one is the most fascinating yet because of the way it was done and what it targeted. Let's start with you, Dr. Theo Echampon. Thank you very much for agreeing to be on PM Express tonight. Dr. Khalid as well, Dr. John Osai Kwapon, all of you, welcome to PM Express, this special edition of it. And I'm delighted that you chose PM Express to adore this research of yours. I want us to get into this because I just want to be surprised by all this. I've just seen the summary of the thing, just executive summary, a bit of the introduction. I'm happy to look into the details now. Let's get into this. Dr. Theo Echampon, I believe, will start. This is going to be an interaction, but also a presentation of the findings. And so let's get into it right now. Hello, Doc. Do we have his audio muted or because I can't hear him at all? Hello, Doc. Yes, let's hear you.
Yes. Good evening, Evans. Can you hear me?
I can hear loud and clear. Let me see if I can hear Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you?
Loud and clear. John Osai Kwapon?
Great.
Yes. Hi, Evans. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. You can see on our screens here, Ghana 2020 pre-election report of the study of 36 competitive constituencies. Dr. Theo Echampon, walk us through this.
Okay, thank you very much, Evans. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. It gives us great pleasure to be here this evening to share the results of our flagship pre-election survey, which looks at competitive constituencies in Ghana. And as you know, this presentation is brought to you in collaboration with Joy FM, with Joy News, and Joy Election Headquarters, who are our partners. My name is Theo Echampon. I'm an economist, a political risk analyst, also a co-founder and member of IRIS Research Consortium. And as you have indicated, I have my colleagues, Dr. Musa Khalid and Dr. John Osai Kwapon, also both co-founders and members of IRIS Research Consortium. A little bit about us. This conversation didn't start today. It goes back to about 4 years ago. But we decided about a couple of months ago to action this to create a newly formed public opinion and polling research company to cover research, design, advisory services, as well as data analytics. There's a little disclaimer policy here in terms of the research outline. But for today's presentation, we're just going to be covering a bit about the project, the background, go through the methodology, go through some descriptive findings, and talk through or spend a bit of time talking through the main findings, which we have clustered into three teams. At this point, I would like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Khalid, to take over and walk us through the methodology and background, and then I'll come in, and John will also come in likewise.
Thank you, Dr. Theo, for your nice introduction. So as Theo has hinted, this project was conceived a few months ago by myself and the team at IRIS to primarily gauge voters' opinion on performance of government on key critical areas, and also to get a snapshot of voters' intentions on who they'll be voting for and why in the upcoming general election. In this, our survey, the key questions that we ask are how voters rate the performance of the government on addressing education issues, managing the economy, creating jobs, fighting corruption, improving security, providing infrastructure, and the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we ask voters that given these issues that we are asking them to rate the government on, which of the two main candidates, which is Nanado and John Mahama, do they think is better or will be best suited at addressing the issues? We also ask voters to tell us whether they have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Nana Akufo-Addo and John Mahama. And given the recent nomination of Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman as the VP candidate on a ticket of the NDC, which, if they are elected, will be the first woman VP in our history, we ask voters whether this nomination will influence the choice of party they will vote for. And finally, we ask voters who they will vote for if elections were held tomorrow and why they will vote for this candidate.
And I like that question you asked about the vice presidential candidates. That is such an important point there, because we're looking for research on the impact and influence of the running mates to the outcome of elections. We've been asking this question for a while. I have combed all the research data I can find. I couldn't find one scientifically done one. I have seen something that was based on interviews conducted, but in the small focus group discussion. So I found this to be, I guess, the most thorough, large respondents-based research done to date that specifically gauges how the running mates might influence the outcome of the elections. That's why I found that question quite fascinating. Now we're going to look, when we get into the details, a bit more about Jane Opoku-Agyeman versus Vice President Dr. Bawumia. Which of them will contribute greatest in the eventual outcome for their presidential candidates? That is quite one of the things I'm looking forward to.
Right. Yeah, this was one of the critical questions that we thought we wanted to gauge voters' opinion on, just to enhance the debate. Yeah, so we will see the result as when Theo and Dr. Kwapon presents them. So next, I'll take you through the methods and then the selection of households. I think this is the part of our work that is a little bit different from the others that have been recently published pre-election polls. So I'll spend a bit of time to do the explanation, to explain the reason why we do it this way. So a few weeks, we published our first white paper that details a framework that we have developed to rank all the 275 constituencies in the country using presidential election data from 1996 to 2016. So using this framework, we put all constituencies into a 1 of 4 scale rank. One of it is we call the safe or solid. And these are the constituencies that we think are the safest for both the NDC and then the NPP. In the data, these are constituencies with a historical weighted average winning margin of greater than 28% percentage points. And then just below that, we have constituencies that we rate as likely. These likely constituencies are competitive, but they are not as competitive. They are more competitive than your solid constituencies. These are constituencies with a weighted average winning margin of between 12 to 27 percentage points. Then we have your lean, which is just more competitive than your likely, and then your safe constituencies. These have an average winning margin of between 4 to 12 percentage points. And then the most competitive constituencies, we rank them as toss-ups. These have about an average winning margin, a weighted average winning margin of about 4 percentage points. Next slide, please, Theo. All right, so in this table you see here, this broadly gives you a summary of all the number of constituencies in each of the rank that I have given. The most important part I want to focus on is the 73 lean and toss-up that you see in the table.
Yeah.
These are the most competitive constituencies out of the 270. And these are where we specifically focus on our poll.
And I must indicate, I mean, if you join us on election headquarters from the election eve into election day, we'll be telling you which constituencies to watch this year. A lot of that will come from what the research is saying. Some of them, we know they are swing constituencies. They almost always vote for the eventual winner. And what the Irish team had done is to isolate them for you clearly, see where they are, so you can keep an eye on them. Their outcomes are so significant in the eventual outcome because they're just unique in the way they vote over the years. Yes, so let's get into the details.
So out of these 72 lean and toss-ups, we selected all the 14 toss-up constituencies we have. And as you said, these toss-ups contain 9 constituencies that have always voted for the presidential winner since 1996. So we felt that these are areas where you are likely to find voters that are much more representative on the ground on
Absolutely.
what is going to happen regarding which of the two parties has the momentum. So 14 toss-ups, 12 constituencies that we rate as lean NDC, and then 10 constituencies that we rate as lean NPP. So over here, in the 2 slides, you saw a table of all the 36 constituencies and where they are located. We have about 8 of 14 of the toss-ups in Central and Greater Accra region. Yeah. And you can clearly see that the distribution of these constituencies is fairly across all the regions in the country.
Except that it's important to note that majority, as you indicated, can be found in Greater Accra and I think in Central. And for me, it's obvious why, because Greater Accra and Central are the purest of swing regions when it comes to deciding who wins the eventual outcome. No wonder you found greater majority of these very important constituencies in these 2 areas.
Right. 8 of our toss-ups are in Central and Greater, 5 actually in Central and 3 in Greater Accra.
Yeah.
And if you look at the other lean, in addition to the lean and then the NDC and lean NPP, you see that fairly we cover almost all the regions in the country.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give a quick walk you through the methodology. So again, this is a survey that we send people to the ground to speak to voters and then record their feedback directly. So this was a face-to-face interview. And that means that enumerators went directly to these places and spoke to voters directly. In each of the 36 constituencies that we surveyed, we randomly selected 7 electoral areas. And each of these 7, we randomly conducted on average, about 10 interviews. And we made sure that in each household, we didn't speak to more than 2 people in each household, because we know that political choices, people with similar political orientation often live together. So you don't want to oversample people in households. That will eventually skew the result. So we made sure that we didn't speak with more than 2 people in each household. We conducted this interview in the language of choice of the respondent. So basically, if whether a respondent speaks Twi, Fanti, English, or ever, it didn't matter. We chose our enumerators to make sure that respondents were asked questions in the language of their choice. Overall, we sampled about 2,640 potential voters, and this translates to about plus or minus 2% of margin of error at 95% confidence interval. And so this is really what you see in most of the top quality surveys, is that usually the margin of error is very small, and that is where what we chose. All our interviews were conducted between October 28 to November 12. And this is very important because this is after the special prosecutor has resigned and some of his related issues had come up. And so that basically means that if you were to sample voters today, you probably may end up getting responses that are different from what we had surveyed between October 28 and November 12. Finally, you see the graph that Theo has on showing the distribution of the respondents in the country. On the left side, you see that fairly we spoke with households that are fairly across all the regions in Ghana. And on the right, if you zoom in each constituency, you can clearly see that within each constituency, the households that we spoke with are fairly randomly distributed. So from here, I'll hand over to Professor Kwapon to take you through our descriptive findings.
Okay.
Right.
Prof, yes.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Khalid. So just a number of key things we want to highlight in terms of the respondents on to our survey. So one, you would see an average of 220 respondents per region. A greater concentration of those respondents were in the Western, Central, and Greater Accra region. And again, that is because it does reflect the highest, in those regions is where you see the highest number of toss-ups and lean in our sample. In terms of the age profile, you also see that we have a greater percentage, about half of the respondents are within the 18 to 35-year-old bracket. And again, this is very consistent when we looked at it by juxtaposing it with the national population profiles that are published by the Ghana Statistical Services. In terms of gender, 51% of our respondents were male, 49% were female. In terms of educational attainment, about 38% of them had at least a JSS, JHS, or middle school leaving certificate. And again, the gender breakdowns as well as the educational attainment levels is consistent and does reflect the national population profiles if you look at results from the Ghana Statistical Services. And so at this point, I'll turn it back to Dr. Theo Champong, and what he's going to do is he's going to walk us through the key findings from our survey.
Again, this is where it gets interesting. I see the assessment of the performance of government and trust in handling key issues. Issues have dominated the campaigning going forth, thankfully, this year. How are they playing out, Dr. Champon, in terms of how people are responding to them and the trust levels in these issues?
Absolutely. So there are three high-level findings. The first one on the assessment of the performance of government. Here, the question we asked was, how do you rate the performance of the government on education, economy, jobs, corruption, security infrastructure, and COVID-19 management? And out of the 7 areas that this focuses on, the incumbent MPP government scores very highly on education and the management of COVID. This is indicated, as you see on the table, the two extremes there. 6 out of 10 respondents rating the government as having done very good or good, and 8 on education, and 8 out of 10 respondents indicating likewise on COVID-19. However, the challenge comes when you look at the economy, on corruption, and on security, where here almost 5 in 10 respondents rate the government as having done poorly or very poorly, as compared to 3 in 10 who rate it as having done good or very, very good.
Instructively,
but given
instructively,
corruption
yes,
is one of the pertinent issues, maybe I can zero in on the corruption issue and then quickly run through a couple of the other ones, because I recognize that time is fast running.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. I was just saying that same point you highlighted, corruption. I mean, it appears that the lowest scoring for the government in terms of people's thinking happened in the area of corruption, and that when people are rating government, they think government hasn't done well in this area of corruption, which is the lowest they got. Okay.
And the interesting question is, does that actually translate into voter preference, which we would show in the next few slides. But let me quickly maybe touch on the issue of corruption with a bit more granular level detail. So if you break that down by education attainment, what you see is a slightly interesting picture where if you have tertiary or postgraduate education, so basically the higher educated you are, the much more likely it is that you would rate the government as having done very poor or poor on corruption, vis-a-vis those with no education up to secondary level, where about 5 in 10 do a similar rating, and 6 in 10 on tertiary and postgraduate. And at a gender level, males are much more likely, so it's almost 5 percentage point difference and it is statistically significant between the two genders to rate the government as having done poor or much poor on corruption. What is also interesting in the corruption story is that if you look at the aggregate trend, going back to 2002, although it doesn't really feature as a top three important issue for voters, increasingly over time, it is becoming or gaining more traction or prominence. So you can see in 2002, when the Afrobarometer survey was conducted, it ranked 16 out of 26 issues. In 2019, on a similar survey, 7 out of 28. And the latest NCC corruption survey is 11 out of 20. So it's still yet to, get, to the top three. But however, you can see increasingly it becoming, a topical issue, which for me raises an interesting question is, are voters likely not thinking enough about corruption, or are they then unable to connect it to like the national development outcomes if you have infrastructure, unemployment, education, health, dominating, or combinations of them dominating that. But when you put that aside and you look at, so overall, who do you trust in terms of NPP and NDC to manage these issues? What you see is that with 6 out of the 7 categories, the incumbent candidate Akufo-Addo outpolls John Mahama on all 6, with the exception of infrastructure, where John Mahama actually does better than candidate Akufo-Addo. And we're not surprised about this, because you can see that in like the 2020 budget, the government actually dubbed 2020 as the year of growth. And you can begin to see that reflecting somewhat in this infrastructure.
So this again confirms what we had known. And in fact, there was a big debate around infrastructure, where many people thought, I think anecdotally, that the NDC's greatest strength is infrastructure going into the elections. And from what you've shown, it is also true that the MPP's greatest strength going into the elections is education, because that is where they score the highest. And so I guess if you are strategy-wise, an NDC person, you should be drumming home your infrastructural achievements. If you are MPP, you should be looking at education, possibly economy as well, and hammering there quite hard, because you know that people are going to it's going to resonate with people. But if you are NDC, you'll be hitting at corruption, because you see in the thing that people do not really, when it comes to the other slides, they don't really trust that the kind of government had done too well in that particular area. Very interesting, I guess, dynamics there as the results emerging.
Absolutely. So let me use 5 more minutes to try and wrap it up with the other findings. Here, looking at the favorability rating of the main candidate, and the most important question on the vice presidential candidate, and the influence they have potentially on the election. So here we ask the question, what is your opinion of Nana Akufo-Addo? And likewise, what is your opinion of John Dramani Mahama? And the responses on a 3-tier scale, you see that in the top, charts there. But the bottom bit is what is interesting. The net favorability rating, which measures the difference between favorable and unfavorable. So you subtract 71% for Akufo-Addo from 22% unfavorable, 65 for John Mahama minus 28% unfavorable, and that gives you a net of 49.14 for Nana Akufo-Addo and 36.86 for John Dramani Mahama, and the overall net favorability rating is around 12 percentage points, for the Nana Akufo-Addo, the incumbent. And then on the question of the vice presidential candidate, question was, would the selection of the running mate influence your choice of the presidential candidate you would vote for? Quite clearly, you see from here that 7 out of 10, or 72%, indicated that the running mate would not influence their choice of presidential candidate. But I think what was interesting for us is, and that's fairly obvious, I would argue, but what was interesting for us is, of those who say it would, that 25 or 3 out of 10, where do their preferences lie in terms of this question. And what you see on your two charts here, first, the left-hand side one, is a clear preference for Professor Nana Jane Obuku-Agyemang of the NDC. So she sits at about 15 or so percent, and Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia sitting around 13 or so percent. So
that is one of the most fascinating outcomes of this. I mean, seeing that one of her main disadvantages was that, yeah, she wasn't known in this area. Bawumia had been there for so long, yet among those who say they will influence them, more say that she would be the person who will make a difference for them in terms of the outcome. That's interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And when you look at it also, you break it down into it by gender. You can see clearly also a slight preference of females for Professor Nana Jane Obuku-Agyemang, as compared to males. So clearly, there's a bit of a gender or slight gender bias preference there for Professor Nana Jane Obuku-Agyemang over Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. And then I think the biggest question people have been waiting for on the night is the question on, if elections were held today, who would you vote for, and why would you vote for, and your reasons, etc. So here, the table or the chart in here really shows you the breakdown. So there are three main take-home points from this. One is that the incumbent NPP has 11 percentage point advantage in these competitive constituencies, and they're sitting around 44.86%, as compared to 33.92% for the main opposition candidate, former President John Dramani Mahama. The second point is that the third parties collectively are polling under 2%, right, of the poll. But interestingly, when we broke that down, the Ghana Union Movement, or GUM, something like that, is actually polling a little bit much better than even some of the established parties like the CPP.
Now, just a second there, because this was confirmed by the Political Science Department research that was launched last week. They also mentioned, they found that GUM, the Ghana Union Movement, will be almost the third force in this year's election, which is also something you're confirming.
Yes. I mean, it's what the data is telling us. We were relatively shocked with that, given that they're a fairly new party, but they seem to have made some inroads with voters in terms of their preferences. But I think the third and the most important point I want to raise here is that you can see almost 19% of voters or respondents in these places who say that they are undecided, right? So collectively between the NDC and the NPP, in these competitive constituencies, they don't have enough for them to get over the 50% plus one threshold that is needed to guarantee a first round victory. And it means then in the next couple of days that are left for campaigning, they would have to do a lot more work to convince these undecideds if they want to cross over the 50% plus one threshold. And we have done the disaggregation, and we can provide further details on these by region and other demographic variables for those who are interested. Two quick other points, and we'll wrap up. One is, again, breaking the candidate choice by age. And what you see is that those 18 to 25 years, 5 in 10 of them indicate that they would vote for Nana Akufo-Addo, as compared to 3 in 10 of them for President John Dramani Mahama. We think that this actually can be part explained possibly with education policies of the government, particularly free SHS, because it's also consistent when we cross-tabulate the data with education attainment, where those who have at least JSS or SSS qualification are much more highly likely to vote for the NPP than they would for the main opposition candidate. And to give you a bit of context, we have 1.3 million voters, or 8.1% of the total voters, who are aged between 18 to 19 years. And these are people who will be voting for the first time in this election. And that is slightly more than the total net change in new persons that were added to the register between 2016 and 2020, which is like 1.25%. So it is quite a big dynamic, demographic that needs to be considered. And the final one I want to touch on and allow John to wrap up is the why or what is the reason that you would vote for your candidate of choice. You can see voters increasingly are making a preference over the policy issues, right? So if you look at the choice on can do better managing the affairs of the country, you have 988 respondents out of 2,149. So here we don't include the third parties or the undecided. This is just for those who have decided and waiting for the two candidates.
Yeah.
And then you have 951 likewise on the campaign promises and policies question. Yeah. But what is interesting is that across the key policy issues, you do see candidate Nana Akufo-Addo again outpolling candidate John Dramani Mahama, for example, on the campaign policies by a factor of about 2 is to 1.
Yeah, I mean, so a bit of very interesting dynamics there. I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, my guests will join me, but we're also going to look in some of the key conclusions that the Dr. Tio Champon, Osai Kwapon, and Dr. Khalid Musa had put together. But my guests will join me from the NDC, from the MPP, as we begin to delve into this. Peter Bomo Tokono, the Deputy General Secretary of the party of the NDC, will join me. Mr. Richard Nyama of the MPP will also join me as we begin to get their reaction to what we've just had, some quite detailed analysis of this. We'll get into the Irish team. Will stay on. If they have some clarifications to give us, they will give us. Stay with me. And thanks for staying with me here on PM Express on this very interesting edition where we're looking at this research that we just outdoored here. A team, of course, in partnership with the election headquarters, looked into this. Irish Research Consortium, Dr. Tio Champon, Dr. Khalid Musa himself, who, of course, you can see have joined us with this, and Dr. John Osai Kwapon. They are going to stay with us because there's a lot more to get into this. I've just been joined in the studio right now by the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, Peter Bomo Tokono. Look at him. He's all dressed in red. He was part of the march today, Probity and Accountability March, where corruption was the key thing on the agenda. And it's interesting, the findings when it comes to corruption in this particular research. I'll come to him shortly on this. And then, Amanda, it's been a while since we've heard of him. Mr. Richard Nyama, of course, with a week to the elections, you begin to hear voices you've not heard for a decade. He's one of those who just emerged. But he's been very active, I understand, on the quiet. Mr. Nyama, how are you?
I'm good, Evans.
Great to have you. So let's start with you. I mean, give me your quick 2 minutes broad reaction to the findings that have just been outdoored.
Well, I would say that this is a rather interesting results, more suspicious results, which would get every politician who is into polling, who is into research, to do a further analysis of what really went into this work. Indeed, my preliminary thoughts when I looked at the methodology, I had a few issues. First, when you want to look at any research report, especially polling, you look at the sources of bias, which may be introduced into it. Then as much as possible, you try and reduce the sources of bias. Then you would be working towards, a credible poll. Now, first of all, you ask yourself, who is the funding source? Who is the sponsor of the polls? The source of funding is very crucial in determining what kind of research is done, and even the objective and what the outcome is. And I'm sure they may want to tell us the source of the funding. Then two, one, the research team that worked on the report, those who led the team, is very, very important. What are their biases? What are their interests? What are the background they are coming from? I see that two are coming from CDD, and one having worked with Imani as a fellow. And I have seen the work from CDD and all that. So sometimes you could easily draw the extrapolation from there, and you would see that there would be an introduction of some level of expectation in the outcome. Then one other key thing that you have to also look at is what was the mode for the selection of the enumerators. So who was the enumerator? Who was on the field? That will also introduce its own, inherent bias into the outcome of the result. So when you have done a fair assessment of the sources of bias, the main sources of bias in the work, then you would be able to determine whether you take the post serious or not. Now, from preliminary information that we have, I don't know the sponsor, but at least we know those who did the work. And I don't know how they selected the enumerators, but the areas they selected, which I'm going to come to, would also tell you some level of bias that will be introduced by the sampling technique and the methodology that was used.
It's good that now you've raised, I think, 3 questions.
Yeah.
Let's get them to respond to that. Let me come to you first. I think Dr. Kwapon, Kwapon, if you may. So the quick first question about funding. Who funded this is what the NDCWJ Secretary wants to know. The question also about how you selected the numerators is also come up. We want to address these for me quickly before I get his reaction from the MPP.
Their backgrounds.
And their backgrounds.
No,
their background. Their own backgrounds. I mean, it's there.
That one has been provided for.
They tell you already. I mean, so that is.
Yeah, and that's why I said that you could draw extrapolation from the independent works that has been done by the institution.
But the work that all of them have done, I mean, there's no doubt Imani and CDD, very credible, very credible, very credible.
Why are you laughing?
So because you are laughing, because of the mischief behind your suggestion. Yes, sir, Mr. Kwapon.
All right. So, of course, those are valid questions to raise. In terms of our background, yes, I do acknowledge that I'm a fellow with CDD, and so is my colleague Khalid Musa. And Theo, again, is a fellow with Imani Ghana. But I think that given the methodology used, as well as the rigor of the peer review process, because again, this is something that we spent weeks going back and forth, several meetings, on every Sunday for hours, trying to ensure the rigor of it, that as best as possible, these are not reflections of any predisposed notions or predisposed biases that we have. We are professionals. We do our work very professionally, and therefore, for us, we are guided by the principles of research, the principles of methodology.
I want to bring
and therefore, I don't think that any of those biases are introduced. The other thing is, and we didn't get a chance to go into that, but the other thing that at least, although we focused on competitive constituencies, what you will notice is that if you juxtapose some of the signals that we are getting from our survey and you compare that to the work that NCC did in the matters of concern to the Ghanaian voter, and you also juxtapose that with
you see a certain similarity
from Afrobarometer and CDD, you do see quite a lot of
similarities there. I want to bring in Dr. Theo Champ on a question about funding.
Yeah, no, I can quickly address that. So this is largely self-funded. We are a relatively new company, but we've been working as consultants and professionals for a while now. It doesn't cost, that big in terms of amount to run these sort of surveys. And again, because we spent a lot of time digging through the data and isolating constituencies, when it came to picking even like the enumerators, we had people who are trained and they have been doing this or collecting this on the field consistently for the last, 5 or so years. So they knew what they were doing, knew what they were about. And if you look at the heat maps that we provided earlier, which probably I've shared on the screen, if you even pick or isolate one constituency as an example, you can see that the places that we sampled from are very much random. So they didn't just go stand at the lorry station or Market Square and talk to people to, get an idea of that. Yeah. But in every constituency, you're going to at least 7 electoral areas. And in the household level, you're not speaking even to more than 2 people at a household and skipping the next 5 houses to speak to other potential voters. So all those biases don't really feature much in this sort of survey.
I'll come to that. These are preliminary things to address these questions.
The funding is self-funded.
I want to bring in Mr. Nyama, your broad reaction to the outcome.
Let me say good evening to all your viewers and reiterate the fact that the MPP is winning the elections. And fortunately, all the polls so far collaborate that point. But we're not going to sit on our odds. We have our men on the ground. We have strategies that we're using to ensure, especially on the polling day, that our supporters are first in line to vote and observe the processes. And so we will not rest on our odds. This is not going to be a tap on the back for us to go to sleep. It rather is a call to duty to ensure that these polls actually get reflected on the D-Day. Now, the point is this. Seriously, it hurts. It's the most unsuitable, painful thing to be told in the face that you're losing a battle that you're going into. And so I have no qualms about the reaction of the NDC to all these polls. So far, not a single poll has called it for the NDC. Every single one of them has called it for the MPP. Now, the NDC themselves, and he's here, have done their own internal poll. That shows that they are losing. And I challenged him that if what I'm saying is not true, they should put out the results of their polls, that they contracted an independent person.
So today, I think I heard the MPP at the press conference say that your poll said you're going to win by 10%.
Yes. And that was done by the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology.
For who?
For us. We also
commissioned them to do it.
We commissioned them to do it.
Okay.
And the percentages they are bringing, very similar. There's a 10% gap between the NDC and the MPP. The margins, 51, 52, virtually across all of them. For the MPP against the NDC, 41, between 42 and 44. Some I've seen, I think, the highest I've seen is 47 for the NDC. That was the highest they will go.
Okay, so let's come to the specifics of this one.
Yes.
When they asked the question, if elections were held tomorrow, which presidential candidate do you intend to vote for? 33.92% said John Mahama. 44.86% said Nando. Which means that there is going to be a runoff.
No.
You don't secure an outright victory.
No. That's not what it means.
What does it mean?
Now,
if elections are held tomorrow, which presidential candidate do you? In fact, the researchers themselves said that they are there to clarify, despite the MPP's 11 percentage point advantage.
Hold on. Go to the undecided.
They are 19.31%.
Go to the undecided.
Yes.
Okay. So it means that the undecided would vote, but they haven't made up their mind yet. I'm saying that there's a 10% gap between the NDC and the MPP.
That you're getting from the undecided?
No, look at it. 33% to 44%. But
still,
hold on. Let's say that the undecided even split. 10% to NDC, 9% to MPP. The MDC will still lose this election by more than 10 percentage points. They are behind us on every single poll. Don't use, these are respondents in favor of NDC and MPP.
So I get a point.
But those calling the elections are the undecided.
So what you're saying is
and we are leading the NDC by 10%. We are almost at 50.
So what you're saying is that if the undecided from this poll is 19.3%,
yes,
you need 6%.
Just 6% out of the 19 to win the election.
So your point is that even if you give the NDC 13%,
they are still going to lose.
Your reaction to that?
Evans, you see, this is a very, important intellectual exercise. And as much as possible, we shouldn't turn it into rabble-rousing. This is research work. You need an understanding of research to, make extrapolations and make deductions from it. Now, I raise very critical questions.
But Evans, I think he's just virtually insulted me. Listen, he said this is an intellectual exercise. And we should not, hold on, has there been any rabble-rousing?
No, he hasn't said that.
Hold on.
You take offense.
He's made his argument. I come and I'm telling you that based on the question you asked, you have an undecided voter.
Can we do an analysis?
The gentleman tells you that we are doing an academic exercise here. Please. I take exception to that.
Okay, you do. Noted.
I take exception to that.
Noted.
Because if it comes to the academics, if nothing at all.
Noted.
If nothing at all. When I was doing my MPhil, he was in the first.
I want us to look at.
He started that out there.
He wants to.
Before we even came on.
So this is so now I get it. So this is what has happened behind the scenes.
The plan is that they are losing. He's not going to focus on the substance.
At the end of the day, we are destroying the beauty of the program.
No, please. Please.
If you may.
You have people who of substance who come and address the issue. What you do is you undermine and insult their integrity.
Wait.
I come and you ask me a specific question, I'm answering it, and you tell me I should do an academic exercise.
Just a second.
Stop rabble-rousing.
If you pause for a second. So he decides to do this as an intellectual analysis. That's his view. We'll come to you. You will have time
but he has no right to tell me that this is an academic exercise. Because if I wasn't up to it, I won't be here.
Because if we go the way, we're not going to have a conversation. Let him make his point.
Don't let him insinuate that I'm not being academic.
Let's go. I don't know. We're not going to make time.
Please.
Yes, make
so, Evans, I hope that we have enough time to do a
we have 30 minutes, so let's use that.
This sort of noise will not help the understanding of the viewers.
Let's use that. Let's use the time.
First of all, the issue about funding, self-funded. So the first question that comes, what is the interest of those who funded? Those researchers doing the self-funding, what is their interest? That obviously tells you the outcome of such polls. Then again, the response we got for the enumerators was that these are enumerators we've been using. We know them already. They've been on the ground. And when you check the background of those who did the work, the team leaders, they have been working with institutions that have done research, and their research goes a particular way. At least they have been very consistent with research reports that they bring. So if they are using the same enumerators, that tells you the bias that will go into the results. That aside, now let's look at methodology. Methodology is very key because when you get it wrong, the entire credibility of the polls that you have done. And that is where I question the credibility of this polls. I've seen what they have done, the toss-ups and the lean MPP and the lean...
What's your issue with the methodology?
And all those things. Now, you get 73 constituencies on your toss-ups and the leans for both parties. Let's even exclude the possibility of other political parties having strength in some particular areas. But let's go with the 73. The 73 cuts across every single region in the country. Now, out of that 73, you have about 30 for the MPP, being lean, and 29 for the NDC being lean. Then you have the 14, toss-ups. Now, you have to look at the toss-ups. The fact that it has been described as a toss-up, is not enough. Which political party is leading or is holding that particular seat as of yet? What was the outcome in 2016? When you look at all the 14, constituencies, almost all of them are MPP.
No.
They're 14 toss-ups.
No, wait. When you say they are MPP, what you mean is that they are currently held by MPP.
Exactly. Yeah.
But when they are toss-up because they swing.
No, you see...
They swing.
No,
when you're looking at a toss-up, you don't look at their current position.
Evans, relax.
You look at
Evans, relax.
Historical.
Yes, you see, you are looking at historical. But
that's what they are toss-up.
No, the historicals is not determined by a standard formula that every 4 years it changes. Sometimes it is 12 years. Sometimes it is 8 years. For example, Ablekuma Central is considered a toss-up. But Ablekuma Central, we have had 8 years NDC, we have had 12 years MPP. So what is the framework for describing it as a toss-up? Now look at all the 14 constituencies and you realize that it is only 3 that is being held by the NDC out of the 14. So that alone, that 11 additional, toss-up constituencies that you are describing as toss-up brings its own bias into the report. You understand? So the 11, then you have the MPP 9 toss-up, 10 toss-up, 10 lane constituencies. Then you have 11, in the report they said 11, but I realized that they did 12 for NDC and they did 10 for the MPP. Now, when you put it all together, you are looking at roughly some 24 constituencies that are being held by the MPP. And advisedly, when you look at the trends and the fact that from 2016, the MPP is holding those seats, and you are targeting those seats at constituencies that you are going to pick polls from, you are likely to introduce a major bias, a major shift in the outcomes that you get. And I think that is one major fundamental flaw of this research, which the researchers may have to look at.
Remember that they define, just to answer the question about toss-up, just to answer
the definition I understand, and that's what I have not deviated. Because there are very important issues that I wanted to raise.
But this is just to reiterate.
Yeah.
These are toss-up. These are constituencies for them, the way they operationalize it. It's not only the constituencies that swing, but the average weighted winning margin is less or equal to 4 percentage points.
That is not a problem. The understanding is there.
So that's the emphasis.
The understanding is there, but it doesn't nullify the argument I've done, and even the recent ones, which I can.
The social media.
Yes, the social media ones. Now, serious researchers, serious think tanks are doing analysis. In fact, several papers have been released saying that the polls and data collected online appears to be more representative and highly randomized, to the extent that if you are putting a research report that has been done by a group of 3 individuals who are self-funding, and they are sampling 2,600 people, to a poll that will be done on Ghana Web, which would have about 126,000 respondents. Any serious-minded, person who believes in polls and understand research will go for the online polls. And the results from the online polls has been very interesting. I would particularly.
You come to that. Now you're coming shortly. We're coming shortly. I mean, but I want
to. I think you're coming. Your timing. You need to do some timekeeping.
Would you allow me? Will you allow me to moderate?
You're not being very fair.
Would you allow me to moderate?
Yes.
Allow me to moderate. My point I was going to make to you is that the online questions you've asked apply to the online as well. It's limited. You have to have access. All these questions are there that limits the quality of the outcome. But you refer to your online.
Let me refer to that. With the online polls, you do not have the lead sponsors. You do not have the team leaders. Determine some particular.
Let me hear your online. Let me hear your online.
Now, when you look at the polls that you did on 28th of November, you were asking, do you think the MPP government have done their best in the creative arts industry during their term in office? Then you would see the results that comes up. The one you did 18th August, NDC and MPP, who has done better in terms of infrastructure, then 57.
Tell us the results.
56% for NDC, 44% for MPP. Then you look at the one that was done by Ghana Web, 126,611 respondents. And you have President Akufo-Addo get 31.93%. Who stands better chance of winning the 2020 elections? You have President Mahama get some 66.78%. That is very instructive if you look at the sample size.
So you believe
this particular sample size and what these polls, have just brought, just some 0.1% or just a little under 1% of this sample size. So these are the things that we have to look at. We shouldn't just jump on some polls because some numbers have come out and
hold on for me.
You may end up getting premature ejaculation.
Thankfully, this is a late night show. Hold on, let me bring in Mr. Nyama. Mr. Nyama, so let's look at some of the specifics.
Yes. First and foremost, I think the NDC is shifting the post and focusing on very mundane issues. So far, we haven't even spoken to the substance of this poll. We're looking at their personalities, and where they come from, and the work they've done. That's why I'm saying we are not going anywhere with that kind of analysis. We need to get to the substance. What is it revealing? Listen, when you go into, look, polling is a science. There's a methodology you use, okay? And that is why you have margins of error. When the margin of error is too much, then the correctness of the poll is suspect. The lower the margin of error, the higher the work and the perfection of it. You look at the experience of the people involved and what they've done over the period. Okay, now how on earth can one not chew gum and walk at the same time? I don't get it. Why? Let's take it that they even have their biases. They have their backgrounds. They vote, and they know where they are voting. Are you saying they don't have independence of thought to put up a scientific analysis and research paper out there? Are you telling me that all the pollings that have come out, the international ones, the EIUs,
the Economics Intelligence,
the CDDs, the CODEOs,
you want us to analyze all that? We can
hold on
and analyze that.
You see, all those polls, not a single one. I've challenged him. And Evans, this is the one that the MPP contracted the University of Science and Technology to do. The results is out. We are leading, okay, by some 51.7%. It falls in line with the others. I'm saying the NDC has done a similar one. I challenge you, publish it. It says that you are losing the elections.
You are just
publish it.
You see, that's what I'm saying.
Adekoka
this is an
on a different.
Let's analyze. Analyzing the polls. We are moving away from. When you were speaking was quiet. We are analyzing these polls. Let's analyze the polls. What is it about conjecturing NDC has done?
No.
Do you know whether we have done polls?
Allow him.
You work in our office.
Allow him.
If you have it, why don't you put it out?
Please go on.
Let's do an intellectual analysis. Let's look at what has been presented. They are waiting for us to respond. And you are here talking about NDC.
If you are intellectual, you won't be saying some of the things you are saying.
Really?
Okay. Number one, from your own intellectual point of view, the toss-up constituencies are largely MPP. If you say toss-up, it tells you that the MPP is likely to even be losing it. So if I were you, the analysis I'll be making of it is that, look, if they have brought up more MPP holding seats and they are toss-ups, it should be that the MPP is likely to lose than saying that they've gone to select MPP's seats, which shows a bias towards the MPP.
What is your own? Allow him. What is your own interpretation of that? Does that this are going to the specific and the meat of this?
Yes. Look, for me, a toss-up is because it's a swing constituency. It's just another name for swing. Now, if it's tossing up, it means it's game for everyone. The NDC could win it, the MPP could win it. It means go in there and work hard based on the data and analysis they've brought for you to claim that seat back. You have a better chance of winning the elections if you focus on the toss-ups. That is what they are telling you. But beyond that, if you look at the toss-ups, they are talking specifically to constituencies, MPship. But the elections are in twofold. You have the presidential and the parliamentary. If you come to the presidential, specific questions were asked, and specific answers and percentages were given. And on all the issues that were polled on, coming through the CDD surveys over the years, till this one, even the infrastructure argument that the NDC makes.
Yeah. Which again, this poll confirms
yes.
is their strongest.
But look at the margin. Look at the margins of what the NDC is supposed to have been doing in infrastructure compared to what the MPP is doing. And apart from that, the MPP is leading all of the other issues.
Okay.
Now, you take, and if you want to look at it, take those same surveys in 2016 and see the percentage points between John Mahama in 2016 and Nana Akufo-Addo in 2016.
This is the CDD comparison you're doing.
Look at it. The metric, approval rating, okay, for Afrobarometer 6 2014, for John Mahama, it was 36%. Come 2020, it's 77% for the sitting president. The same CDD for 2016, 48%. You come to sitting president, it's 61%, 2020. Are you seeing the difference? That's about 19 percentage point difference. You come to CDD 2016 October, 53% rating for Mahama. You come to 2020, 70% for Akufo-Addo. And they targeted specific issues. And they are telling you it's not just them. You go back to other surveys that have been done in the past, and you just you do a comparative analysis. It shows that Nana Akufo-Addo has a favorable rating as we speak today. And if elections were held today, so they based on this go to the question, if elections were held today, and take the corruption thing they went on about.
Which again, the research confirms to be your weakest point. One of your
Our weakest point. But compare John Mahama to us. That is where the difference is. You don't do the thing.
Which research are you referring to? This again is a CDD Afrobarometer.
Oh, hold on. I'm talking about this very Afrobarometer. Yes, this thing. What is corruption? Corruption.
Okay, so hold on. I want to get a reaction to this. There are a few things I want to get the reaction of the team to. Dr. Tue Champon, Osai Kwapon, and Mr. Khalid, you want to respond to a few of the things that had come up?
Yeah, I can quickly start, and Khalid and John will chip in. It's a bit fascinating hearing Mr. Otokuno speak about sampling, and that online posts are even better than face-to-face posts. We've been in this business long enough. We have been academics of long-standing repute, and I can tell you on authority that there's nothing anywhere that indicates that online posts are, superior in terms of, predictability than, face-to-face posts. If that was the case, then, for example, in the U.S. elections, nobody would have been picking up telephones and ringing and, asking people. And I actually want to put a question then to him. If it was an online poll, how likely is it, or would it have been for example, for his grandmother in the village to have been taken or factored into in terms of the poll? Because you're actually going to end up with a lot of biasness in the results. You can try and control for it statistically, but it does not represent what is truly happening on the ground, because a lot of people actually in Ghana are not online. And so if you want to get, a real sense of people's feeling, you have to go and speak to them face to face. So for me, it just comes back to the question of, if we did it online, how likely is it that Otokuno's grandmother, for argument's sake, would have been incorporated in that survey or sample size? I can guarantee you it's almost next to impossible.
Yeah, okay. Very briefly, because just a minute. No, I would like to take a break. Just a minute. I want to hear from either Dr. Khalid or Osai Kwapon quickly on some of the other key issues that have come up.
Yeah, so regarding our professionalism, look, all of us are academics. We've been doing this. None of us have any dog in this fight. We just do it professionally, the way it is. We look at the science, we look at the data, and that is how we do it. Okay. And quickly on the question about the toss-ups, the reason why they are toss-ups is the margin of winning is very small. And if you remember in 2016, there was a wave. And what you see in the data is anytime there is a wave, it tends to carry along the toss-ups as well. So that explains why in 2016, a lot of the toss-ups is currently being held by the NPP. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an NPP.
We saw that in 2000 as well. When there was, I want to take a break. When I return, I'll get them to deal with the specifics. Stay with me.